Welcome, everyone, to the 152nd episode of White Horse live from White Horse Black Mountain and co-produced with Rad House Studio. Tonight is another great AmiciMusic program, this time featuring the works of little-known women composers. Dr. Daniel Weiser is back, of course, and has brought with him Francis and Emanuel Borowski, along with violist Anna Pelzer. We are so glad to see you all, both here in person and online. All of us here at White Horse and Rad House Studio, thank you for viewing White Horse Live during the past 2 years. You've ensured that we all had a musical home to come back to, and we sure are grateful. Now, even though we are fully open again, artists are still faced with fewer and smaller audiences than before COVID, so they too are grateful for your ticket purchases and for any additional love you might be willing to share by way of our virtual tip jar. For those of you who are watching online today, all you have to do is hit the little $sign right next to the chat window in your viewer. Thank you for helping make this series a success. Please help us spread the word by sharing the event notices and telling all your friends. Now here's your host, Bob Hinkle.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to White Horse Live number 152. Whew, can't believe it. Today, we're all about extremely worthy women composers who, by virtue of male intransience, chauvinism, and just plain testosterone through the ages, have been given unfairly short shrift. White Horse Live is grateful to Dr. Weiser for bringing out extraordinarily talented musicians and great music here over the last decade plus. I'll never forget the first one, 12 years ago. Neither Daniel nor we knew what to expect. It was, after all, chamber music in a former Chevrolet dealership with a bar. But it worked out okay. I'll never forget there was a gentleman who sort of stumbled in, sat down over at the bar. He had on his work boots, his bib overalls, and a T-shirt, farmer tan, in evidence. And he sort of looked a little confused and out of place, but he looked a little better as the show went on, with a couple of sopranos singing. And afterwards, he came up to me and he said, I didn't think I liked this kind of music. I thought I was ready to leave, but for some reason I stayed and, listening to them people singing with the beer in front of me, I think I liked it all right. And so that's when we knew we were into something good. My job is just to get Weiser going, which is not difficult at all. Please join me in welcoming to the White Horse the man of few words, Dr. Daniel Weiser.
Thank you. Thank you to Bob, everybody here at White Horse for the many years that we've done shows in this incredible venue. It's been really just a wonderful collaboration. We're glad Bob has survived the pandemic here and do everything we can to help keep music alive here at White Horse. And great to have Rebecca and her crew at Rad House Studios in on this collaboration now with these incredible live streams, which are just beautifully produced. And so we thank them for all of their great work. And we thank all of you who are here live and in person. It's so wonderful to be back doing these shows with a real audience. But we also love you if you're watching on the live stream. It has been certainly a tough couple of years, but I think we're coming around. And it's always great when we can get together and perform some really exciting chamber music that is not very well known, these pieces, and to do it with such wonderful colleagues. Many of you have seen Emanuel and Francis Borowski before, a brother and sister team who live in Baltimore with me, and they've been here several times. And then Anna Pelzer, who is currently living in Germany for the past 10 or so years and freelancing on viola there. She has come over now, this is the second time, to join us, and it's always wonderful to have a piano quartet. It's tough to get all of us together, and this has been a really fun program to put together. We knew that we wanted to have a program of all women composers. Anna and I were talking about what to title this last month, and I couldn't come up with anything too good, and then out she came with Iron Maidens, which I thought was fantastic, because it really does have so many meanings. There is something so strong about these women that they could write this kind of powerful music in the face of a lot of men who did not think they could do it. But also the Iron Maiden is kind of that medieval contraption that keeps you enclosed. And in so many ways, these women were so held in for what they could do, and their job was to only be mothers and wives. But to see them have this opportunity to compose and to write great music. This is not just pretty music written by women. This is powerful music that should be performed in many more places. And it's only in the last several years that a lot of this music has become available. Many of these women wrote these pieces, but they were written, left in manuscript form, which meant that it was really hard to sort of get musicians together to read that. Somebody had to come along and put it out and print it, and then make sure it was out on the internet for us to be able to read. And more there are websites and people who are doing this, not only for this kind of music, but for full symphonies. Just recently, a wonderful symphony by Emily Meyer, another forgotten 19th century composer who wrote 4 amazing symphonies, but only in the last year has one of her symphonies been transcribed so that orchestras can actually play it. And so that's part of the battle. Of course, the other part of the battle is men. And men, sadly, have been standing in the way of women and their ability to do these things for many centuries. And I'm going to have to read a couple of quotes by men just to show off how terrible they were. The great Aristotle wrote, "A woman is an unfinished man who, like children and barbarians, are not competent in the ways of thinking." Ooh. Thomas Dekker, in a appropriately named book, The Honest Whore, in 1604, wrote, "There's no music when a woman is in the concert." Hans von Bülow, a very famous conductor whose wife was stolen by Richard Wagner, so that was good, but he wrote a really horrible saying in 1865. He said, "Reproductive genius can be admitted to the pretty sex, but productive genius unconditionally cannot. There will never be a woman composer. At best, a misprinting copyist. I do not believe in the feminine form of the word creator." Oof. A few years later, in America, George Upton wrote a book called Women in Music. You might think, oh, that's good, somebody thinking about women. But really the book is about how women were muses and inspiration for men to write music. And in it he writes, "Not only are women too emotional and lacking in stamina to write music, but a woman's mind simply cannot grasp the scientific logic of music making. It does not seem that woman will ever originate music in its fullest and grandest harmonic forms. She will always be the recipient and the interpreter, but there is little hope she will be the creator." Now, obviously, there have been women composers throughout history. We can go back to Hildegard von Bingen, a wonderful medieval mystic in the 12th century who wrote many Gregorian chants and full mystical liturgical plays. Up until the Renaissance period, Francesco Caccini wrote one of the first operas ever written in 1625. Barbara Strozzi wrote many beautiful songs at the same time. Isabella Leonarda, Mariana Martinez in the classical period, who was friends with Haydn and Mozart. And into the 19th century, when many more of these women had some opportunities, the most famous being Clara Schumann and Fanny Mendelssohn. But there is a very sad quote from Fanny Mendelssohn, because part of the issue was that even when these women were writing music, they were not getting encouragement from those around her. And Fanny, whose brother, of course, was Felix Mendelssohn, certainly thought that she should be getting encouraged by her brother, but he did not think she should be publishing music. Again, he thought her role was as a wife and a mother. And she wrote in 1836, "When one never encounters either objective criticism or goodwill, one eventually loses the critical sense needed to judge one's own work, while at the same time losing the wish to create it. Felix, who could easily have taken the place of an audience for me, only reassures me sparingly. I am thus more or less alone with my music." And Clara Schumann, for her part, wrote in a diary a few years after this, saying, "I once thought I could be a composer, but it's arrogant for me to think that when there has been no other women composer." So many of these women internalized these ideas of the patriarchy that they had no ability to create, and that has been a really sad thing. And we're going to see that it's just not true with these women who we're going to play today. One last quote from Amy Fay, a wonderful pianist who studied with Franz Liszt, and she sort of recognized part of the issue. She said, "Women have been too much taken up with helping and encouraging men instead of placing a proper value on their own talent, which they are too prone to underestimate and to think not worth making the most of. Ruskin was quite right when he so patronizingly said that woman's chief function is to praise. She has praised and praised and praised and kept herself in abeyance. Women are finally beginning to realize that they too have brains, even musical ones. It has required 50,000 years to produce a male Beethoven. Surely 1 century ought to be allowed to create a female one. So it's really inspiring that these women, with all of these difficulties and with society sort of thinking that they shouldn't be doing this, that they all wrote pretty amazing works. And so we're going to begin with just one movement of a quartet by a Swedish composer, Amanda Rontgen-Maier, who again is not very well known. She wrote this piece in 1891. She was born in 1853 and sadly died at the age of 40 from tuberculosis. So this was written just a couple of years before her death. But she was the first female graduate in music from the Royal College of Music in Stockholm in 1872. She was a wonderful violinist, and she soon went off to Leipzig to study violin with the concertmaster of the Gewandhaus orchestra, who was named Engelbert Röntgen. And while she was studying with Engelbert, Engelbert's son, Julius, who was a pianist, fell madly in love with Amanda, and they were married. So she became a Rontgen-Maier. And they settled mostly in Amsterdam over the next several years. And she wrote a few pieces during this time. She wrote a wonderful violin sonata I just performed that, again, has not been played in probably 100 years. But their home was a mecca for artists who were passing through Amsterdam. And so we know that Edvard Grieg and Clara Schumann and Johannes Brahms all visited the Rontgen-Maiers. And it became a place for concerts and poetry and art to be taking place. As I say, she did become sick in about 1887. And in 1890, she takes a trip to Norway. And that seems to inspire this piano quartet. It has a bit of the Griegian influence, also seems to have a kind of Beethoven influence. It is just full-out power, and I think it really, she wanted to show that women could do it just as well as men. So this is the first movement of Amanda Rontgen-Maier's Piano Quartet in E minor.
All right, so that gives you a little taste of Amanda Rontgen-Maier and the power that she brought her to her music. We're now going to do a full quartet by a Croatian composer by the name of Dora Pecacevic, who again is just being discovered now, and I just performed a cello sonata of hers that was absolutely gorgeous as well. So hopefully she'll get more played. There are a few things you can find on YouTube. She was born in Budapest, and so I guess there's some debate amongst the Hungarians and the Croatians about who she belongs to, but she's just a wonderful composer from that area. She came from a wealthy, kind of a royal family, a noble family from Slavonia. Her father, again, was this Croatian governor. Her mother, a Hungarian baroness, born in 1885, and again, sadly dies far too young in 1923 at the age of 37 from complications of childbirth after giving birth to her first child rather late in life. She is widely credited now with being sort of the first great Croatian composer, man or woman, the first one to write a symphony, the first to write a piano concerto, all in the first part of the 20th century. Her mother was a very good musician, so she taught her very early on, but it was clear that this was a talented young lady. She wrote her first piece when she was 12 years old, and then was sent off to Dresden and Munich to continue studies on the piano and to do some composition as well. When the First World War hits, she was kind of horrified by the way that the aristocrats took the whole thing, and she sort of wanted to remove herself from that part of society. In fact, she became kind of a socialist. At first, she became a nurse, and she wanted to tend to the wounded from the war, and she would later finally get married to a military guy named Ritter von Lumba. But she wrote a letter in 1918 to a friend of hers, sort of describing her disaffection with her own people, I guess, the higher class people. She said,